We have Verena Denny here from the Stadtwerke München. She's Public Affairs Manager of Mobility, Smart Cities and Digital Politics. Welcome. We have also Professor Maurizio Tira here. He's from Italy, so University of Brescia. Right, my Italian is not so good. Professor of Town and Regional Planning. Welcome. Please take a seat. And last but not least, we're really getting up the European view here. Anton Nikitin, he's the Chief Sustainable Officer of the city Vilnius of Lithuania. Welcome. So, as before, please grab your microphones and be ready to answer any of the questions we might have from me or the audience. The audience is welcome to shoot questions into the app anytime, so I can get them on the iPad and read out loud to get our discussion even started more. And before we really dive into our topic of the European strategies for urban mobility, as we look beyond the borders, we really want to open up the view and not only look into our own cities and the landscape. The timing is really crucial for this discussion, and we are having a very interesting weekend ahead of us. There are more than 400 million Europeans who will elect a new parliament, and it's also that 5 years after the European Green Deal was launched first. We already discussed the new mobility cities concept, and there are all those terms, you could say, included: sustainability, inclusiveness, safety, efficiency. Transportation systems are under the radar or maybe above, and we're looking at them really closely. We want to look at the best practices that you hopefully bring to the table, and for a vision that is looking at the future of urban transportation and mobility in a European context. As the cities really grow and as we are looking more people coming to the cities, so even the rural areas being maybe disconnected or having a hard way to really get into all the opportunities that are out there, we firstly want to look at the integrated transportation solutions. So looking maybe really first at the Italian example, Professor Tira, how can cities, from your experience, implement integrated transportation systems that are seamlessly maybe connected to various other models of transportation, public transit, cycling infrastructure, ride-sharing services, and other pathways?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to the conference. Well, the situation, I think, is very different when we look at the size of the cities and towns, because we have heard about the 432 nodes, but the greatest majority of towns and cities in Europe and in Italy is small and very small. So 75% of cities and towns in Italy are less than 5,000 inhabitants. Mm-hmm. So in that situation, no public transport, no chance. They don't have the money to manage. And so we have to use other kind of modes. And I think the solution is walking in the inner center of the city, mm-hmm. using shared mobility in the largest area of the city. If you look at the biggest towns, that are not so many, because there are really two big metropolitan areas in Europe, that is Paris and London, and then there are other kind of big cities or medium-sized cities, then the integration of modes is very important. But same time, I think we have to have the courage to close down the downtown city to any other kind of modes, because I try to put a circle on the cities above 200,000 inhabitants in Italy, that are not so many, and in that circle of 1 kilometer's ray, people could walk. I mean, I don't talking about disabled and the elder, but we can find solution for them. But people that can walk, they should walk, because you know about the 15-minute city. The 15-minute city was not invented in Paris and not by architect Moreno. Sorry, it was developed more than 1 century ago in the United States by Clarence Perry, when the cars manufacturer started selling cars plus houses. and they realized that they couldn't work. So they defined a neighborhood city, and in the neighborhood, people should walk, only walk to get to the services. And I think we have to have the courage to close down the city center. In my town, Brescia, 200,000 inhabitants, we have a metro line. It is the smallest town in Europe with a metro line that costed €1 billion because it is a rich town. But in any case, in the center, in the very center of the medieval town, there used to be a Roman origin, there is a metro stop, and 20 meters away, there is the biggest parking place. So everyone that go to park there, they will not use the metro. So €1 billion spent and not courage to close down the city center. When you go to the airport now to take a flight, you walk 1 kilometer to get to the plane, and you do not complain. You will never ask to be carried by these electric vehicles because they are for elder. You don't want to be seen in such a situation. So you walk and you don't complain. But when you are in a city, in my city, that is not so big, people complain by walking 500 meters. So that's not civilization, I would say.
Okay. Ms. Zeni, would you agree that it's maybe that simple to then only take the walking and the closing down the city center in German cities? Go ahead, Danny. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, that's my last name. People get confused with it quite a lot, but yeah. I think walking is one of the many good options that we have. So I'm trying to bring in the public transport operator view in here. So we do the public transport for the city of Munich, which includes the metro, the buses and the trams. And of course, walking is very important to us as well, because of course you somehow have to get to the station. So we do really see that this thing with so-called park and ride parking stations that work quite well from people who want to come from the rural areas to get into the city of Munich. But in the city, we're trying to focus on other modes. For example, we do have our own bike sharing service. It's called MVG Bike that you can use as a free floating car sharing offer within the city. And we really see that we have to combine the modes. So it's not only public transport that, of course, is the backbone for mobility in the urban space. Without the mass transportation, we could not move people from A to B. If everyone would have to walk or go by bike, I think the cities would be more than full. So I'd say it's very important, but not the only option that you should give to the citizens.
And we heard before that maybe the courage of a mayor can be important to change something, but maybe as also in your position as Chief Sustainability Officer, you normally don't read that in a political context or in a capital. How is your experience with that?
That's a lot of courage, and I think that's a lot of courage for all the citizens and for all the, especially the administration workers, because we are in this middle between politicians trying to make everybody happy and us making everybody a bit unhappy. Meaning that if we do, I don't know, whatever we do the cycling infrastructure, so the car owners will be very unhappy, the cycling owners will be sort of happy, but usually we do some compromises, right? And that's the city. What is the city about? It's basically very different people with very different needs, and we shouldn't be talking that cars are very bad. They're bad as a consequence that too many people use the car, unnecessary trips made by car and so on. But if you live like 20 kilometers from the city and there is no public transit, the cycling isn't available, it's fine to have a car. But the problem is that we use cars even if some people need to take 2 kilometers ride or 1 kilometer ride, and they go with a car. That's when it becomes a problem. But in our case, it's making a lot of people a bit unhappy, and that is a lot of courage for everybody. But I think what was mentioned before we sat here, it's about citizen involvement, and that's a really learning experience for us as Vilnius City, because before that we were doing a lot of change with quite, I'd say, not enough involvement from the citizens, meaning that we were, transforming our streets, we're narrowing down the lanes, we were, doing this really big transformation on some streets, and there was a big backlash. And we had the local elections last year, and there were two main topics of the elections. One is whether we should narrow down the streets, meaning narrow the lanes of the cars, not having them 4 meter wide, but like 3 meter or 2.75. Another one was even funnier: should we mow the grass? Should we let it grow, or should we like make it? This shows me that we don't have really real problems in the city in a way, but yeah, of course we do. But my point is that we have to be all really courageous, and especially as a city, as a public servants, we have to really try and find new ways to discuss with people and involve them, and also discuss with politicians. That's also a big thing for us.
Maybe taking this also to a point where if people can imagine something, if they see something, if they can touch it, if they can feel it, the easier way to get into the results are...
Yes and no.
Yeah?
Yes and no. Yes, it's true. But usually what's happening, we are... how to put it? We are trying to fight emotions with arguments. And that's a very emotional change for some people. If the city is really car dependent or car oriented, or was car oriented for decades now, right? So the people feel like they're threatened. Their right to ride a car is threatened, and that's their emotion. That's not an argument. And we can see all the arguments. We transformed 20-something kilometers of streets, redesigned them really from scratch. We have this beautiful street design guide which can fit into one postcard. If you Google Vilnius street design guide, you will find it. But then the argument is those streets became 50% safer, 70% safer for pedestrians, 60% safer for cyclists. They're like all the indicators show that. But that's not an emotion, and that's, people don't feel that, and people don't understand that, well, those streets become more quiet, and it's nicer to be there, but the emotion of car drivers sometimes is, not the car drivers, but like this general emotion and populistic and so on, that's hard to fight. And I don't think any of the city has this narrative to work quite well with that. I talked with the colleagues in Copenhagen or in Amsterdam. The same discussions are happening, even though every second trip is made by bike there. The same discussions are still happening there, and I think they will continue to happen.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks. Another beautiful European city. There's so many of them. Barcelona. You might have been there, and you might have seen the super blocks. So they're super blocks where they block off a certain area and say within this area no car traffic, but you should have your shop, you should have access to the school, good bus transport, and so on. So doesn't only sound good, it is good. And Barcelona is anyway a great city, and it's nice and warm, and people like to be outside. The experience is that the rents in these super blocks have exploded. It's much more expensive because people want to live there. So which means that the locals who used to live there can't afford it anymore. So you might have read about some political discussions there about kind of opening some for cars again. So behind this transport aspect is a huge societal question of who's living in the city, who can afford the city. What about people who can't afford the city and who live outside and commute? So they're huge, and as you said, there are huge emotions behind, and it's not always easy to come across just with arguments there, but it really involves a lot of talking, discussions, understanding each other, because ultimately we all want good mobility.
And maybe I can add on that also, there was a post going online of, I don't really know who did it, but it was generated by AI, pictures of cities based on the party programs. So how would our future look like if we go vote for that party or for that party or for that party? And it was astonishing to see, you've seen it as well, to really see the differences in what kind of world, as you just said, is it even livable, is it affordable, is it something the locals are really then sticking to it? To really see that, it was quite interesting. Would you then say maybe also the the sustainability in designing the streets, designing the neighborhoods, building those super blocks, is that sustainable for the city and the citizens to live in? Klimke? As you just brought the example, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a good question. Infrastructure in general, and design in general, and there we come together with another angle. Materials, raw materials, circular economy. Can we afford just to build more and more, and just throw away the old? So how do we get more into usage of sustainable materials? So how do we decarbonize? Because a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions linked to transport are coming from building up the transport infrastructure and operating it. Building airports, building train stations, building new roads. Enormous amounts of greenhouse gas emissions from that. There are quite some programs, also European programs out there that can support these kind of developments for cities. But it remains, of course, expensive. It remains a challenge to foster and to manage this. And I come back to the sustainable urban mobility plans, which are designing then where do we want to go, where does the city want to go with its mobility, what kind of infrastructure is needed, and then you derive also from this planning the need for investments. So better ideas about investments. Don't kind of do separate works for the tram line and then sometime later for the road, but kind of do it in an integrated way, so for the same space.
Design is certainly an option, but it's expensive, as you say, and it's a long shot. It takes a lot of time because we have an existing infrastructure that we don't change overnight. That's why I said I think there's other things we need to think about it. If we really want to make car sharing a success, we need automated cars. We will, with the current technology, will not reach penetration rates that we would need. I mean, if we had more car sharing in our cities, we could reduce the number of vehicles by 10 times almost. That's according to some studies. So there's a huge potential. And if I then look to Europe, there is London, and that's it, a city that really experiments with it. In the US, you see that not only in San Francisco, but also in Seattle, in Austin, in Miami, in a lot of areas. And I think we do not enough to foster these innovations, to get them onto the road. There is a project in Hamburg I know of, and there is another one in Munich, and that's basically it in Germany. We do have some people mover technologies that we are testing, but passenger cars, real robo-taxis, as you wish, I don't see them, and that's an issue, I think.
Is it the lacking of innovation, or is it the new technologies adaptation?
I think we have a framework that is sometimes doesn't allow for enough flexibility. We don't have the courage. I think it's a mixture of several things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, maybe to jump in that one. I think we also see that in this project you just mentioned. We're trying to build up a ride pooling service, which will be autonomous, probably by the end of 2025, and also some buses, so-called bus platoon. So one bus is going in front and the other one is going to follow autonomously. And while talking to Volkswagen, Moja, all these companies, we really see that it's so-called problem. Who's going to start? Is the industry going to start? They're telling us, no, we need you as public transport to tell us you're going to buy 20,000 cars by the end of 2026 to foster this innovation. So I really think we should sit together and try to set all these things apart and work together on this one, and not trying to tell one party, you have to move first, you have to do this. So just try to get on the table all together and work on this transition. And maybe to jump back on that thing that you mentioned about the different views of the city, depending on who is in charge in the city. I think that's really a crucial point for us as well, because we really need reliability. We need the funds, we need to know that we can do all these infrastructure projects that take up to 20 years of planning, that we can still do them even though the parties are changing and we're having new politicians who are in the lead. So that was one thing I wanted to say about this one. So really have sustainable and reliable funds and also the political will to change something in the cities.
Mm-hmm.
No, I just wanted to react to the example of Barcelona, because I was very radical before, but I was talking about the downtown inner city. I know the situation outside is completely different. So Barcelona was a very good example, because in the Cerdà plan, the idea was very democratic. So the scheme of Barcelona, maybe you know, was without a hierarchy in roads. So every kind of roads was the same. Now they are creating a hierarchy. So some roads will have more traffic than others. And so first of all, you need planning. You need planning, because you can't do just by experiments. You need planning, and you need to give a hierarchy. But when you give a hierarchy, you know that the rent will increase, so then people will live in a better condition. But I think the politics should plan how to charge these conditions, as we did by creating infrastructure. When in Milan they created the first metro lines, of course, the price of houses along the metro line increased. And so they charge those owners for contributing to the realization of the metro line. It is what we call a tax, transportation tax, something like that. So I think you can manage this situation by realizing that there will be someone living in better condition, maybe because it's more pleasant, and you have to compensate by re-equilibrating, by charging those guys that are living in those conditions, contributing to the creation of the better living. So I think the politics should plan what they want to realize. Otherwise, you cannot act the market freely.
Mm. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely right. Maybe you have heard about the Social Climate Fund, or not yet. You know about emission trading scheme, so charging for CO2 emissions. And part of that funding will in the future go to Social Climate Fund. And actually, we're talking about huge numbers overall. So this is about 65 billion euros over 7 years, plus some parts from the member states. So more than 80 billion euros that can be used in the future to help those that are most affected by the often expensive measures taken to reduce climate change. So this can be for buildings, it can be for installation of buildings, it can even for subsidizing energy costs, but it can also be for transport poverty. Those who can't afford the new transport, the cleaner transport, those who don't even have proper access to public transport, don't have a proper tram line or bus or something else. So indeed, we need to take care that those who are not directly benefiting from all of this, we as society will benefit, but there are some people that don't directly benefit, and they're struggling already, and it gets more difficult for them, that we can help them as well.
Mm. And maybe even taking up the topic of accessibility and social inclusion, then have you a few examples of Lithuania, how they are doing with that?
Actually, we were lucky not to have a lot of problems of affordability, especially the housing affordability. Now we're starting to have it. And we come unprepared. We saw other cities, and we're like, yeah, we don't have that problem or that big of a problem. But now we're starting to have it. But I mean, the social part. In all sustainability is really important, but sustainability is also about making things more effective. If it's a circular economy, it might be even cheaper to do that, right? And if we look at sustainability as a whole, then of course we have to talk with different kinds of people and involve them. And with a transport, well, accessibility or especially economic accessibility is quite easy to solve. The cycling is basically free in the cities, and the cities, for instance, building cycling infrastructure. Vilnius example is quite good. We had 30 kilometers of cycling infrastructure. We're a mid-sized city of 600,000 people. We had 30 kilometers in 2017. Now we have 170 kilometers of protected cycling infrastructure, and we see the numbers growing. With the numbers of the model split grew from 1.5 to 4.5% in these 5, 6, 7 years. So it's a big changes that are happening. But of course we have to have that in mind, and the accessibility as a whole in a different. From the different points of view is important, but also the same thing, the way we plan our cities is also important, because sometimes we try to solve the problem of people living far away from the city, and how do we bring them, and so on and so forth. But why don't they live in the city, right? Sometimes they don't live, they're a couple. Sometimes they don't live it because they can't afford a flat, or there is no flats for big enough for families, right? Or because the developers want to build only the smaller ones. Sometimes they live because they want to live like closer to the nature, so that the city doesn't kind of offer this nature inside the city, and so on. So the cities are so complex, and it's so interesting, so that whatever problem you take, it's 10 other problems that are happening at the same time. But I think this is where sustainability or SUMPs also help, right? We have a SUMP since now 5 years now, and it works because we are more, having this comprehensive view on things, on sustainable mobility, but also the sustainability in general, or climate change in general. It helps. And my position is new in the city. The position of Chief Sustainability Officer didn't exist until end of last year. So it's a new position, but it's also like coordinating all the sustainable transition, which is hard, but also really complex. So everybody have to work towards the same goals.
Mm. If you are not the first mover yet, and you're not leading by example, as you say, so and you want to give inspirations to others, what would be the next step you would agree on to really take into your strategy, take into your daily active doing, to produce then maybe being the next leader? What would you advise for cities? Go ahead.
Have a look at the ELTIS web page. The ELTIS is the European web page where all experiences on sustainable mobility. ELTIS, E-L-T-I-S. E-L-T-I-S. There you find a wealth of information, you find contacts, and you find a lot of advice also on the sustainable urban mobility.
Mm-hmm. That's very easy. Go ahead, Google it. Done.
I think there are many good examples in Europe, and I think one point that is very important is to force the coordination between urban and mobility planning that traditionally has been a little bit separated. Also in the competencies in City Hall, I see that many cases there are two separate competencies, but planning, because we have also to keep in mind that the European Commission has a target for 2050 to stop urban sprawl. So our cities should be regenerated as they are. And I think the coordinating planning and transportation is very important. For example, I brought my students to Freiburg because I think is a good example how they develop new settlement by designing before the transportation line. So everyone living in Vauban, for example, now they can access the tramway in 300, 400 meters. So that's a good coordination between urban and mobility planning. And the car rate ownership in Freiburg, I think it's 0.4, whether in my town is 0.67. Mm-hmm. So even if we have the metro. Because outside we have a very low density area where people commute. But as he said, of course, for some people, I use car very much. I live in the rural area. But soon as I enter in the town, I want another scheme, another design, another policy. So coordinating urban planning and mobility planning is crucial, and we have best practices in Europe to look at. I think Freiburg, I don't know if you agree, is a good example.
More field trips. Go ahead, yeah.
Well, a lot of things have been said already. Maybe one, I mean, it has been mentioned a couple of times that this is additional cost. It's something people don't like. I think we need to focus not only on telling people what not to do anymore, but also creating things that have a value, right? There needs to be a positive something in it. And if I was a mayor, I think I would try to balance that and concentrate on things that create an immediate value.
I think that's easier said than done.
Well,
but yeah, definitely.
that's probably true.
Yeah. And also, yeah, sit together in those conferences and talk about all the good examples that are out there, have knowledge about those websites. So if all the data is there already, use it also for your city and, yes, benefit from all those best practices that are out there.
I'd say it's, well, first of all, it's capacity building in the city. So having more people who would be flexible, adaptive, to take those good examples. Because the thing is, and that's also from the point of Vilnius, the thing is that the demand from the society is growing, right? The need for quality, for better public transit, for better streets, for everything, the need for quality of the environment, of everything is growing tremendously quickly. In the past, I think some 20 years ago, we didn't have these kind of discussions at all, right? And now we're having, okay, what kind of cities we want to live in? And the public sector isn't as flexible to grow enough people to do that. And also, if we talk about involving citizens, it's a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of human resources to go and speak and really discuss that. And, and we usually don't have that. And we are really, the story was cutting, those bureaucrats. They don't do anything, right? In the public sector. So and now we're lacking people just to go and talk with the society, but also being very flexible about what you do. I'm really inspired by how cycling works in Amsterdam and how it works in Copenhagen or how it works in Stockholm, but I can't just copy paste it. I would love to. The infrastructure is perfect. I was trying to do that, but then you see that the societies are different, and you have to adapt to the local context, and that change doesn't happen quickly. Infrastructure is easy. It's costly, it's expensive, but it's the easiest part, I think. The hardest part is the way people behave and the way people think. So that's about public sector to be flexible to that, to really feel what's happening there and really find also wording, but also the tools how to change that.
I want to add on that one for our final note, because we're already running out of time and we have a few more minutes. But I also want to encourage our audience, if you have a question still, you can put it into the app and I can read it out loud. Otherwise, you take the break time then later on to discuss everything. We talked a lot about this panel, like what others can do and what the cities can do and what mayors can do and politics and everyone else involved. Where do I start with myself? What's your advice for us all? Where can we really make a change and impact if I go out here tonight and then tomorrow start something, changing something? Where would you start?
I think you have to use stick and carrot, because I partially agree that people, yes, but I also use facilities if facilities are there. So stick and carrot, I think it's the best politics, and the people will change behavior if they find a clear policy in favor of. And then there are some evidences, like, for example, the worse condition of air quality, the accidents and safety in urban areas. So most of people do not conceive this because they are scattered problem, and not concentrated. So they feel that it's always somebody else's problem. But probably information is very important, and stick and carrot. In some cases, if I would vote a mayor, they would forbid me to use the car whenever I want to go. I will vote for him.
Okay. Next. Yeah, go ahead.
Stepping around? Okay. No, I think it's really about questioning your own mobility behavior. Maybe check, do I really need to use the car? Or maybe also tell your friends about all the great offers that are there. Some car sharing offers, for example, offer friends benefits. Or also tell people how easy it is to go from A to B with our Deutschland ticket. So, just question yourself and try to look around and try to motivate the people close to you to change their behavior. You probably will not reach all of them, as we said, and I strongly support the push and pull factor. We do need more funding that is issued by the politicians, and but also try to regulate a little bit more. For example, if you park your car in the streets of Munich, you only pay 30 euros a year, which is basically nothing. So maybe start somewhere there.
What we can do, what I can do, is just question each time, ask myself, do I need to take this mode of transport? So, for example, I took the train to come to Berlin from Brussels, which works fine. I'm going to take the night train back. I'm going to share with 4 people. It's something I haven't done since student times, so it's going to be interesting.
Adventure.
I have to say, it's not only for environmental reasons, because the flights were really, really expensive as well. And just see, do you need to use the car or can you use the bike? And I always cycle to work. Since I'm in charge of a cycling strategy for Europe, I also stop at I also stop at red lights now. I have to admit, I didn't always, and I'm surprised in how many other cyclists don't. And if you cycle in Brussels, don't look at your mobile phone. I got caught for it 2 years ago. It costs you 183 euros and 40 cents. You will only do this once and never again.
That's costly, yes. Safety first.
Well, if you want to have an immediate impact, make sure that you vote this weekend.
That's for sure,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I'm privileged here because I don't own a car, so and I don't need it in my city. So that's good. But I think thinking every time you do any choice, if you buy something new, do you need something new? If you use a car when you don't need to use a car, but also as people working for the public sector, I think we have to think about even the closest colleagues and talk with them as well. Coming back to work, and some of people, I'm having these funny discussions with my colleagues who come to work, which is like 2 kilometers away, which is really still a walkable distance, and still we have a lot of good days like this, and even in Vilnius, and it's not always raining as well. But I mean, of course, but I think talking with a colleague is also a good thing. Starting with the closest environment and trying to kind of be, that person who says, "Hey, let's go walking."
More walking. Our time is unfortunately up. Thank you so much for everything that you shared, and a big applause from the audience.
Thank you.